Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing our series, The Good, the Bad, and Philosophy. In this video we're going to be looking at what is Kantian ethics. Now, one of the most commonly taught deontological theories is the ethics of Immanuel Kant. Kantian ethics could be the subject of its own series very easily, but here we will just provide a brief explanation of the two most popular formulation of Kant's categorical imperative, as well as the distinction between the four kinds of duties to ourselves, to others, perfect and imperfect. So let's take a look. Kant attempted to derive a deontological ethical system from pure logic alone. The system that he developed is the precursor to many modern deontological theories. It rests on a central tenet known as the categorical imperative. Well, what is a categorical imperative? Well, an imperative is something that you should do or something claiming you should do this. So we just need to understand the difference between categorical and hypothetical imperatives. Hypothetical imperatives are a means to an end. They claim that something is good for something else. A shovel is good for digging holes. Going to war is good for getting people killed. They're saying if you want to do X, you should do Y. The categorical imperative, on the other hand, is claiming that some X is good in itself, or morally good, such as saving someone's life is good in itself. Throughout his work, Kant states his categorical imperative in several different ways. The first and best known basically claims that you should not do anything which could not be universalized into a law of nature. What does that mean? Basically, when I think about this, I always imagine a parent saying to a child who misbehaved, what would happen if everyone did that? If this universalization would not defeat the purpose of your original action, it is moral. If it would, it is not. And we'll get more into the fine-grained details of this in a second. But basically, the idea here is whatever action you're thinking about taking, imagine a world where everyone has to do that action as a law of nature. It's not just that that action is permissible, but that action is done by everyone. In that world, would it be possible for you to even take that action? And would you rationally choose to be in such a world? Or to take that action and be in such a world? And we'll take a look at how that separates out in a second. But in order to do that, we have to talk a bit about duties. So, before looking into some examples of this, we're going to briefly touch on duties. Kant makes a distinction between perfect and imperfect duties, and another between duties to yourself and duties to others. Perfect duties are those which do not allow for exceptions, while imperfect duties don't always need to be followed in one way. And there's different ways when we universalize something to determine whether it's a perfect duty or an imperfect duty. If the negation of a perfect duty is universalized, then it will result in a logical contradiction. You won't be able to take the action at all that you originally wanted to take. While if the negation of an imperfect duty is universalized, it instead will result simply in a world which a rational person would not choose. Basically, perfect duties are those such that their negations, if everyone did the opposite of whatever that duty is, then it wouldn't make sense for you to try to take that action which is the opposite of the duty in the first place. Well, imperfect duties have much more to do with if the negation of that imperfect duty was universalized, if everyone didn't follow that duty, it just wouldn't be really a place that a rational person would choose to live. So, take the example of keeping promises. According to Kant, this is a perfect duty to other people. This is because the negation of this duty, if universalized, would be self-defeating. Say, I want to break a promise for financial gain, and I want to understand, is this moral or not? Well, let's use Kant's rules to figure this out. So we're going to universalize this maxim into universal law. So say that everyone, as a matter of natural law, always breaks promises if it will get them financial gain. What that means is that no one would accept a promise if they think it would give the other person financial gain. So I wouldn't even be able to make that promise in the first place, let alone break it for financial gain, because no one would accept those promises because they would understand that everyone always breaks those promises if they can get financial gain out of it. So this would not be universalizable, and so it would be a perfect duty to say that you must keep promises, because its negation leads to something that is contradictory when universalized. Helping others and giving to charity is an imperfect duty according to Kant. This is because while a world where no one gave to charity would not defeat the purpose of, say, keeping my own money for my own financial gain, we could imagine a world where no one gives to charity, and I can still make the choice to not give to charity and keep my own money. It doesn't defeat the purpose. I still get to keep my money. But a rational person couldn't choose to live in such a world, or even choose to create or put that world on others, because that doesn't sound like a very nice place to be. Imperfect duties may admit of different ways to follow or conform to them, and they need not be followed all the time. So if the duty doesn't necessarily kind of self-defeat, but simply creates a world that a rational person wouldn't live in, it's an imperfect duty, and these imperfect duties can be followed in different ways. I don't have to always be giving to charity. There are different ways I can follow it, different charities I can give to, different ways that I can help others, which is what makes it an imperfect duty. So, summarize, we've got duties to self and others. We have perfect and imperfect duties. We didn't touch on duties to self that much, but basically they're going to follow a similar vein to duties to others. So a perfect duty to self is to yourself, and the negation is impossible to universalize and still act upon. Kant's example here is do not commit suicide. An imperfect duty to self for Kant is the negation is irrational to universalize. And Kant's version of this is to develop your talents. A perfect duty to another is the negation is impossible to universalize and still act on, keep promises, is Kant's example, and an imperfect duty to other is the negation is irrational to universalize and still act on. Donating to charity is his example. There are several other ways that Kant states the categorical imperative. He claims they're all equivalent, but fails really to explain exactly in what sense. Another popular formulation, which kind of deals more with the original ideas of categorical and hypothetical, is to say we should never treat others as a means to an end only, but always as an end in themselves. Just as the categorical imperative is talking about good in itself, we should not treat others ever as just a means to an end, just kind of a hypothetical means to an end, but rather as an end in themselves. This doesn't mean that we cannot use people to get things, such as paying someone for a service or a good, but rather that we should not use them solely for that end, that we should be improving their life as well. Basically, by paying someone for something, we not only get what we want, but we also improve their life. But if we stole it, on the other hand, we would get what we want still, but they would not be an end. One of the positive results of our action would not be their life being improved. They would be merely a means because they wouldn't get anything from the deal. But paying them for a service, we make getting the object an end as well as giving them some benefit an end. So that was Kantian Ethics, a very brief dip into Kantian Ethics. Next up, we're going to be looking at agent-centered deontological theories of ethics, and then patient-centered deontological theories of ethics. Then we'll look into consequentialism, and finally, virtue ethics. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.